Hello, everybody. This is Gerald Salenti, and we're honored today to have with us a man of men. The guy's been on the other side. You know what it looks like. And that's why I am who I am. I was on the other side killing environmental legislation and all this stuff back in the day. And then you see the other side and you become a different person. And Colonel Douglas McGregor has seen a lot of it. And that's why he's very much against the wars going on and wants peace on earth. And thank you for being here, Douglas. And you are going to have a big event coming up down in Texas. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, we founded a nonprofit called the National Conversation. And the link will be provided. And I've asked them to send that material to you right now as we're on the air. At any rate, it's an attempt to go around the country over the next year if we're successful with the first one in Dallas. And talk to audiences that about all the major issues of the day. Judge Napolitano, I, and Natalie Brunel will be on the panel. And then we have Dr. Olga Ravazzi, who's going to moderate and raise the questions. But we're going to cover topics, but we're going to let the audience to some extent drive it. For instance, we'll ask about, how do we solve our financial dilemma? We have a $9 trillion bill due at the end of the year. And so how do we do business with this? Do we get rid of the Fed? Do we keep the Fed? What's the answer? We'll start in that area, and then we'll move through all the major issues of the day, trying to get people to tell us what they think, because what we'd like to do is make this the foundation for what we hope will be maybe a third party, some alternative to the uniparty. Because everybody has figured out that it doesn't make any difference who you vote for. You get John McCain at the end of the process. And that's what we're watching right now. So we'll see if it works. I think people will enjoy it because they'll get a chance to hold the mic and ask us questions and express their opinions. It'll go for 2 hours. Then we're going to have dinner with some people. I think it could be a lot of fun. And what we just don't know is it's an experiment. We've never done this before. And we hope that it will be something people want to do again in the future.
I think it's, as I would say as a trend forecaster, you're on trend. I'll give you 2 reasons why. You're going to we the people.
Mm-hmm.
We the people. What's the beginning of the Constitution, right? We the people of the United States. Yeah? It's about us. It's not about them. It's not about politicians telling us what to do. It's about we the people telling us to represent what we want to do.
Well, it's very important what you're saying because, we've seen Elon Musk, and I like Elon Musk. I don't have anything against the man. But this is a billionaire who's announcing a party that he can fund. And he's telling everybody what he thinks. Well, that's fine. But if this is going to work, it has to be bottom up. It can't be top down.
You got it.
And that's why we want these sessions with people across the country.
So number 2, you said that I agree with, is a third party. It's a uniparty. It's a crime syndicate. They're murderers and thieves. By their deeds you shall know them. And again, just to make it clear, that we know the murder level with all the wars. And on the thieves end, hey, remember the Panic of 08? When the banksters made up this crap about derivatives and, hey, you don't have a job? You're deep in debt. You got no money. Don't worry over here. Sign. It's a subprime mortgage. According to the Levy Institute at Bard College, the Federal Reserve gave the bankster bandits $29 trillion. And talking about crime syndicate, what is JP Morgan Chase convicted of 5 felonies? Rigging the precious metals market? We only had to pay $900 million. Shut the hell up, Salenti. Don't you know who I am? I'm Jamie Dimon. All right. I don't go to jail. But you were drinking and driving. You're 0.1% over the limit over here. Put on handcuffs and take you to jail. That's different. But anyway.
Well, no, listen, you're right. Too big to fail means too big to go to jail.
You got it.
And what's even worse is, Sheila Bair at the time was trying to tell people, you want to bail them out. Okay, bail them out 10 cents on the dollar. They'll all be out of a job. They'll be run out of town. Why are we bailing these people out at 100% on the dollar when they're responsible for the disaster? Well, we see how far her advice got.
Yeah. again, but just to make it clear, it was this Italian guy. I'm not too fond of him being an Italian. His name was Mussolini. The merger of state and corporate powers is fascism.
Yeah, yeah.
And now what Trump is doing with this Intel deal, fascism in front of our eyes.
Actually, what he did looks more honest.
Yeah, but it's again, it's the merger of state and corporate powers. The bigs get bigger.
Of course, absolutely.
So going on to what you're saying again, a new third party, a We the People party. And the person I would like to see as president is Judge Andrew Napolitano. There's nobody that knows the Constitution and the Bill of Rights more than that guy that I know.
Well, he knows it, but he also knows, as we do, that we live in post-constitutional America.
Yep.
And while the Constitution is a wonderful document, it was written in 1789. And the nation today is very, very different from the nation then. So we have to go back to the Constitution, and we have to look carefully at what we need to fix. I mean, one of the things that came up, and I guess this is off the track for us, but somebody said to me, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that people who come here illegally don't have the same rights as citizens of the United States. And I said, well, you're right. There's nothing in the Constitution that specifically says that, because the Constitution is mostly about what the government cannot do. That's really what the Constitution is about.
Yeah, that's it.
But that doesn't work.
No.
What good is a Constitution that does not protect its own citizenry? And I said, we have got to make changes. Somebody can't just walk into the country and declare that, well, I have rights to free medical care. I have rights to free education. I have rights to live anywhere I want. No, you don't. You're not even legally in the country. We have to make those distinctions. And the people at the time in 1789, as you know, said they thought the Constitution would work for maybe 20 years and it would have to be revised. But it never was. And that's because the nation that we were in at the time was very different from today's nation. And frankly, America is largely bottom-up built. But today we're dealing with an enormous, enormous country with a vastly different population and different circumstances. So we're going to have to revisit that, and we're going to have to address it. This is not the time for it, obviously, but it's coming. But let's face it, when's the last time anybody declared war legally on anybody?
I know. The World War II.
Well, actually, let me go back further. Why the hell did we go to war in 1917?
I know.
Germany and Austria-Hungary presented no threat to us.
Nope.
It was totally ridiculous.
Nope.
By the way, let's go back to the Spanish-American War.
Yep.
The Spaniards offered us everything we asked for. They didn't want a war with us. There was no reason to go to war with them, but we did. So we've had this problem for a while, and the sad part is Americans are asleep at the switch. I mean, there are a few that were out there that oppose these things. I mean, I know my family was rabidly opposed to those wars. But then again, you got to remember, they were Quakers. And they thought differently. And they just said, there's no danger to us from Spain and Cuba. There's no danger to us from Germany, Austria, Hungary. And they also saw what we were doing to the Japanese to provoke the war so that we could get into the war, not to fight the Japanese, but to fight the Germans, which is another issue. But the point is, this has been going on for a long time. Yep. And I think the only thing that's going to fix us is probably bankruptcy.
No,
where we're headed now.
I disagree. That won't solve it, because you were going back to let's go just to World War II. I was doing a podcast with Judge Napolitano. And by the way, that's the only person I do a podcast with, and you. I don't do them anymore because I have to put the magazine out. It's taking so much work. And he said about the United States back then cutting off Japanese oil. Yes. And in 1941, and Japan imports 100% of their oil. In the United States, UK, and the Dutch, they cut off 88% of the Japanese oil. Yep. So I Google it up. Franklin Roosevelt seizes Japanese assets comes up. History Today, mainstream. On July 26, 1941, President Franklin Roosevelt seizes all Japanese assets in the United States. Mm-hmm. You know why? Those dirty Japanese invaded French Indochina. Wait a minute. What the hell are the French doing in French Indochina?
Yeah, that's right.
You mean stealing, robbing, pillaging Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam? Oh, the French Foreign Legion in Algeria, Morocco, anywhere we want to go and steal and rob? Why are we getting involved in this? Oh, the United States, the UK, and the Dutch cut off 3/4 of Japanese trade, overseas trade. They cut off the oil. Can't understand why they bombed Pearl Harbor. I never figured that out.
Well, here's something else you can add to that list. As soon as it became clear to George Marshall, who was Chief of Staff of the Army in June of 1941, where things were headed, they were alerted to what Roosevelt was going to do. And there were already people on the Hill cheering this on, saying, oh, this is wonderful. We need to punish these evil Japanese. And so he called the Chief of Naval Operations and said, we need to sit down and plan for an inevitable war with Japan now, seriously. The Japanese are going to be cornered. They won't have any way out. They are undoubtedly going to attack us. So they had a meeting about it. In the meantime, the commander of the Pacific Fleet received orders from Roosevelt to keep the Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
You see, every year we had exercises. We would go out, and normally we gamed against the Royal Navy for a long time, and the Japanese, and then eventually just the Japanese. But he said, no, this time you're not going back to the United States, because the whole fleet would go back to from Puget Sound all the way to San Diego. That's where the fleet stayed until the next year. He said, no, you're going to keep the fleet at Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
And the commander of the Pacific Fleet wrote a letter back and said, this is extremely dangerous. You're effectively presenting a target to any potential adversary. And obviously at this point, that looks like Japan. Strongly urge you to reconsider your decision. And he was told, frankly, shut up and color. The fleet stays where it is. Now, somebody must have been sitting there, I would think, in uniform at the top, figuring out where things were headed. Unfortunately, the geniuses in charge, and they weren't bad people, but the people in charge were convinced the Japanese were going to attack Corregidor, in other words, the Philippines. That would be their first strike. To them, it was incomprehensible that the Japanese fleet could steam all the way across the Pacific and launch an attack on Pearl Harbor, even though we know General Billy Mitchell told everybody in 1922 that was going to happen. So we went through this whole process. Here's the rest of the story. The whole fleet was supposed to attack right across the Pacific to relieve the beleaguered garrison in the Philippines. Well, there was a problem. We only had 11 fuel tankers. And the Navy said, we can't sustain the fleet in this major assault all the way across the Pacific. Well, Marshall didn't know that. And Marshall had 2 divisions ready to deploy immediately to the Philippines. The Navy said, we can't send them there. It's too dangerous. We'll never make it there. So those 2 divisions ended up forming up in San Francisco and moving to Australia instead. We know what happened in the Philippines. We had 12,000 men marched into captivity in one of the worst examples of inhumane treatment of prisoners of war in human history. Roosevelt seems not to have worried about any of those things, or at least not considered them carefully. What he really wanted was a war.
Yeah.
And that's what he got. So the whole thing is a disaster. And right now, in fact, one of the reasons I'm very happy to talk to you today is that we're not watching what's happening in the Trump administration. We're listening to the rhetoric. But right now, we have enormous numbers of reconnaissance flights and combat aircraft flights from the Kola Peninsula up near the Arctic Circle in Russia, all the way down to the Black Sea. All of these flights are flying along right on the edge of Russian airspace. All of these are designed to provoke the Russians, to warn the Russians off, to bully the Russians. The question you have to ask yourself is why? Why are we engaged in this? Why are we flying a B-2 all the way to northern Norway, right across from Russia? Why are we introducing combat aircraft elsewhere? Go back to Alaska. Remember in Alaska when President Trump went out to meet Putin, and he had on the tarmac at Elmendorf Air Force Base F-22s, all the newest aircraft, attack aircraft. And while he met Putin, what happens above? An overflight of a B-2 bomber with supporting aircraft. What are we trying to do? Is this a meeting to resolve differences and promote peace and stability? Or is this a grand reality TV show moment for Donald Trump to demonstrate his greatness to anybody who cares to watch? And let's go back a little further. What about the comments made back in June by this Lieutenant General Donahue, telling everybody that he could overrun and seize Kaliningrad in the space of a day. Kaliningrad, which is, whether we like it or not, is sovereign Russian territory. I mean, we've had blowhard generals many times in the past. We could spend an hour talking about blowhards, going all the way back to Korea and World War II and so forth. But this is a pattern that we're seeing right now. And several people have asked me, do you think this general spoke out of turn? Do you think we're flying these combat aircraft missions and reconnaissance missions because this is just standard operating procedure? Do you think that Trump doing these things is accidental, is a pattern? I said, yeah, there's a pattern. And I think Trump is only too aware of it. I think he believes that he can bully everyone and anyone into doing what he wants them to do. And when he doesn't get what he wants, what does he do? He has a temper tantrum. You saw his tweets about the meetings in Beijing and with China and India and Russia. Well, I hope you're satisfied. I hope you get what you wanted. I mean, this is sort of silly nonsense. How do you turn to India that has never been an enemy, never killed any Americans under any circumstances that I can think of, and then you tell them, well, you're going to be punished with tariffs because you're buying oil from Russia?
I know.
What are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to sprout oil wells from their rear ends in India? They can't do that. Okay, so they've got to do it. And then he says, fine, then we're going to cancel $35 billion worth of contracts with Boeing. And we hear the president championing, the American worker. If you're protecting the American worker, how does canceling $35 billion worth of airplane orders from Boeing help America's workers? They've got over 150,000 people involved in airplane construction. That's one of the things we do well. I mean, the whole thing is, in my judgment, a very dangerous set of circumstances, because we've got a man in the White House surrounded by amateurs, all of whom think the world is their oyster, that they can tinker with everyone and anyone wherever they like. And they don't go into Donald Trump and they don't say, Mr. President, we may be powerful, but we're not the only game in town. We're not the sole great power any longer on this planet. This is dangerous. We really need to get along. What are we getting instead? More bullying, more bloviating. I think it's very dangerous, and Americans should pay attention, but they don't even know, in most cases, what's going on.
There's more important things to know about. About Taylor Swift getting married. And that's the headline story last week in the CNN. People don't know what's going on. Here's a quote for you. Talk about the generals and the dopes in charge with big mouths that don't know anything. You ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine clearly believes that it can win, and so does everyone here. That was Lloyd Austin.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
All right. How stupid can you be?
Well, he's quite an achiever. He's probably one of the dumbest people that I've met in uniform.
Yeah.
And certainly that's true for a lot of people that know him. And he managed to get to the highest levels of the armed forces. Yep. That's quite an achievement. The problem with all of these people is that they think American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are like Kleenex. You pull it out, you blow your nose, you throw it away. If you need more, you just go get one. We're not Kleenex. We can't go on like this.
And then you're talking about the United States and what's going on, and what Trump said to the meeting that they had over there in China. This is an article from the Financial Times on Wednesday, excuse me. China flexes military muscle with display of nuclear triad. And then another article, they show what the troops look like as they're marching down, and you look at these guys and the women and the uniforms they have and what the shape they're in. And you well know that what America troops look like now, and I'm not making this up, they're too fat to fight. They can't get enough people in there that aren't in good enough shape. And you got 1.4 billion people over there versus 347 million over here. Oh, and they have the biggest naval fleet in the world. And again, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal on Thursday. The anti-ship missile formation was part of Wednesday's military parade in Beijing. New weapons rolled out. All of these advanced weapons that they're coming out with. Oh, and we're going to stop the Chinese? And again, what business is it of mine as an American? Oh, what's going on in Taiwan? Oh, it's only been going on for what, a couple of thousand years?
Well, actually, no. I agree with you. What happens in Taiwan is none of our affair any more than China should be interested in what happens between us and Cuba. There's no reason for that either. But I think we need to understand that the Chinese and the military power they built is designed largely to keep us out.
Yep.
It is not designed to conquer us. There's no evidence for that. And the Chinese are not preparing to do that. By the way, a friend of mine, you were talking about fat soldiers. A friend of mine sent me this note and he showed me a picture. And it was the back of a soldier. I won't tell you whether it was male or female or people will get upset. But he said what they need to do with the backside of this soldier is stamp pass, no pass. Because this person was so fat, it was disgusting. And of course, you saw this parade back in June to celebrate the Army's birthday, which is not a minor affair. People forget that before we were a nation, we were an army. While George Washington had an army in the field, that was the United States of America. But what they did was appalling. You look at these people, you think they were out for a Sunday stroll. It looked like a terrible gaggle. I've seen Boy Scouts do a better job of marching in parades.
Again,
this sort of thing is ridiculous.
Yeah, Jane, put that picture up again. Look what they look like. Look at the shape of these people. Look at what they look like.
Well, they also practiced.
Yeah, but look at this. We don't come close to it. Look at the shape. Look at the size of the. They're not eating crap every day.
Yep, that's absolutely right. But we say none of that matters. That's irrelevant. Winston Churchill, when he was the prime minister during the Second World War, he would insist on reviewing troops that were deploying to North Africa to fight and then subsequently to go in Normandy. He wanted to see them. He would inspect the ranks and then he would watch them pass and review. And a reporter said, well, Mr. Prime Minister, do you really think how well they march and how they look really makes any difference to how they're going to fight? He said, that damn well does.
Yep.
And he said, that is a reflection of the discipline and leadership of the organization. And it's their readiness to fight that is reflected in how they look and how they perform. That's why I'm here. Well, we've lost sight of that because we've lost sight of so much that is fundamental to us as Americans in our society. The military is one example. You've talked about finance and the readiness with which we dismiss things that we know are wrong, but we tolerate anyway. So.
Yeah, and you talk about Churchill. That's the guy that you talk about first. Again, all things are connected. As I say, it's a crime syndicate. Yep. You mentioned Franklin Roosevelt. Before that, you mentioned the Spanish American War. That was Theodore Roosevelt, wasn't it? That was another Roosevelt.
Well, actually, he wasn't president. He was.
No, I'm just saying, but another Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And then going back to the Iranian, the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. And again, the only newspaper to report this in 2017 was the Financial Times. The telegrams from Winston Churchill to Theodore Roosevelt, what's his name? Theodore Roosevelt's grandson, great-grandson. What was his first name? I forgot it. Funny name. And he was the CIA guy in Iran. Another Roosevelt that overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran because Mossadegh had the nerve to say after they got the Shah out that oil does not belong to Anglo-Iranian oil, better known today as BP, or Standard Oil, better known today as ExxonMobil. It belongs to the Iranian people. Kermit Roosevelt.
Kermit, yeah, that's right.
No, it doesn't. It belongs to us. And that was the Churchill. But anyway, it's been war after war. It's the military-industrial complex. Well, and now you see what's going on in Germany. Well, Germany's in a recession for 2 years, going into their third. Borrowing $1 trillion, we got to stop those Russians? Oh, you mean the 25 million you killed in Operation Barbarossa in World War II? Oh, and they were the first ones to beat you, weren't they?
Well, actually, look, that's a more complex history, and the Russians take a lot of credit for a lot of things on the basis of being communists during the Second War. And I think you can make a damn good argument that we had no business helping them to get across the street,
Yeah.
because we ended up with a worse problem after the war ended than we had when it started. But
Yep.
another issue. What I'm concerned about right now is something you just said. You talked about the military-industrial complex. I think we're missing another part of that complex. It just slips from view. It's the intelligence agencies. These intelligence agencies are rogue actors. When you look at all the coups that you're discussing, you've got to go all the way back to the CIA in its earliest years. And one of the things that Eisenhower said in private to JFK was, he said, you're going to have to watch the CIA carefully. And he had a lot of trouble with the CIA. And he brought in Beadle Smith, who had been his chief of staff during World War II, to run it for a while, because he said, I don't have any control over it. You have to go in there and get control of the CIA. And ultimately, you know what happened to JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis, or not the Cuban Missile Crisis, excuse me, the Bay of Pigs. And after that, he flew up to Gettysburg to meet with Eisenhower again. And Eisenhower and he had a long talk, and it was very clear that the CIA was a huge problem. It's never been fixed. We have maybe 18 different intelligence agencies, all working theoretically together, but they're part of this conglomerate over which we just don't have much supervision. And Congress doesn't seem to be concerned. And obviously, nobody in the cabinet seems to be terribly concerned. You've got this man, Radcliffe, who seems to have been handpicked for the job by the Israel lobby. So they could care less what he does as long as he does what they want him to do. We have a huge problem with control. When things run out of control, there's only one way to fix it. It has to be dismantled in large cases, rebuilt. But there's no will to do that right now.
Not under the crime syndicate that's in charge. And that's why we need a third party. Again, going back to JFK, his speech to graduating students in June of 1963. It's all about peace. He said we shouldn't hate the people in the Soviet Union. None of them suffered more than, it was some 20 million, he said, were killed. They lost their farms, their factories, their homes from Chicago to the East Coast. We need peace. That was June, July, August, September, October, November. Jack, you're dead. You talked about him being against the CIA. I have a photograph, Douglas, of me and John Connolly and his wife, Nellie, in front of the book depository, 1962. He wanted to meet me because one of my books, Trend Tracking, I had forecast a new third party in someone like Ross Perot. I'm making a very long story short. This is the John Connolly again that took the bullet in the back sitting in front of Kennedy.
Right.
We're going back into the Anatole Hotel. And he said to me, I read your book. He said, a fine piece of work. And I said, I know your heart's in the right place. He said, but you don't have a clue what's going on. And neither do the American people. Because if they did, there'd be a revolution in this country. This is also the John Connolly that was the Treasury Secretary under Richard Nixon that took us off the gold standard.
Well, I don't think that he necessarily understood the long-term consequences, but bear in mind, it's like so many other things. It was supposed to be temporary. Richard Nixon said this is a temporary measure because the alternative was default at the time. People don't realize that we had bankrupted ourselves between Vietnam and the Great Society.
That's right.
And we should have, what's the right word? Swallowed our pride, taken the bad medicine, restructured and gotten on with it. But Nixon wasn't prepared to do that. I don't think very many politicians were. So here we are.
You see what you just said, nobody talks about. It was the Vietnam War that caused all this inflation and the debt levels go. Nobody talks about that.
No, well, nobody's talking about the $1 trillion plus we're spending annually on defense.
No.
And that, by the way, does not include the intelligence agencies. We have no idea how much money disappears into the quote unquote black budget, but it's substantial. Nobody wants to.
Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed, The world in arms is not spending money alone. It's spending the sweat of its labors, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. This is not a way of life at all in any true sense. Under the clouds of war, it is humanity hanging on a cross of iron.
Yeah.
Eisenhower.
Well, he also said,
Five-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces, two-term president. Again, he, like you, he's on the other side, saw it, knows it, and was a true man of spirit.
well, it's very interesting you bring that up because Jack Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, but primarily Kennedy and Nixon were examples of men who went into the military. They performed their service during the Second World War, and they were at a very low level. When I say low level, I mean they were junior officers serving in the fleet in the Pacific. And they looked at what we had managed to do. You're talking about producing 100,000 airplanes, thousands of ships, and they were just stunned. They said, my God, we're the greatest country in the world. There's nobody like us. Nobody else could do what we do. Well, Eisenhower was at a different level. He was at the very top. And he knew that the casualties that we were taking in Europe, which were horrendous, were much larger than what we were reporting at the time. And he actually sent a note to Marshall in the middle of the Battle of the Bulge because he was shocked. Here are the Germans that put together from scratch an army of old men and boys and launched this at us, and we weren't prepared for it. So he wrote to Marshall and he said, I'm going to need more divisions. Now understand, we already had 63 divisions. He said, I'm going to need more divisions. And Marshall sent him a note back. He said, you're going to have to win the war with what you've got. There is nothing more to send. Marshall never forgot, Eisenhower never forgot that. He understood there were real limits to our power. And when the war ended and we had this victory parade in Berlin, two things occurred. One was that he had discussions with Zhukov, and Zhukov told him how they breached minefields. Eisenhower showed him all the mine clearing equipment that we had developed. And Zhukov said, how long does it take to get that mine clearing equipment up to the front lines? Eisenhower said, well, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. He said, well, that's too long. He said, anything that takes that long, the Germans will smash you before you have a chance to do anything. So then Eisenhower said, all right, well then what did you do to deal with the minefields? He said, I would just sacrifice 2 battalions of troops to get to the minefield. And Eisenhower knew at that point, you can't fight in a war like that. We're not built that way. We can't do it. Then subsequently, after the parade was over, Harry Truman had come over to watch it. Remember, Harry Truman commanded an artillery battery in the First World War, so he knew what it meant to be a soldier. And he was very, very moved by the parade of all these American troops, who incidentally were in step, unlike the ones we saw in June. And he said to Eisenhower, he said, Ike, you've done a great job. I'm so impressed. I want to give you the Medal of Honor. And Eisenhower looked at him. He said, sir, you can't do that. And of course, Truman was shocked. He said, what do you mean I can't do it? I'm the president. He said, no, you can't do that. He said, I've never made it a secret that I have never been under fire. Were you to award that medal to me, that would be an injustice to every soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine who's won that decoration, many at the cost of their own lives under fire. He said, I cannot accept that. Well, Eisenhower didn't particularly like Eisenhower, or Truman didn't really like Eisenhower, or any of the generals, because they were all Republicans. They all hated FDR. That's the truth. But he was impressed with Eisenhower. Now, stop at that point and fast forward to where we are today. Look at all of these generals that we've got, Air Force, Army. They look like Christmas trees. They're wearing so many decorations. It's absurd.
It's absurd.
And what have they done?
I agree with you.
Whom have we fought?
Yep.
It's just crazy.
I talk about that as well. But you totally look at Christmas trees. Got all these little things on. Grow up. What are you doing?
Yeah, so we have a huge problem right now in this country. And again, the average American has lost his or her fear of war because they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you tell them, well, we're going to go to war. Well, we're going to go to war with Venezuela. Really? Oh, okay. Why? Oh, well, they're pushing drugs. Great. Let's kill them.
Yep.
What? War is a very serious matter. It involves many people's lives. And what goes on now is no longer going to be limited to other people's countries. We're at risk. The war will come and visit us. That's the problem. People don't get it. And what you were talking about before about the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians or any of these people, they're building that capability to protect themselves. And if they're attacked, they will visit us. That's what we don't get.
What I'm concerned about is nuclear annihilation. That's good. What was that? What was that guy that invented the bomb? He said, "I don't know he said, I don't know how the Third World War will be fought, but the Fourth World War will be fought with sticks and stones."
Yeah.
What was his name?
I don't know.
Yeah, he was the guy that invented one of the inventors of the atomic bomb.
Oh, okay. Oppenheimer.
No.
I don't know.
Anyway, but that's what it'll be. It'll be again, when Kennedy gave that speech in 1963, he said, if we go to nuclear war with Russia, atomic war they call it back then, he said, life on Earth will be destroyed in 24 hours and generations will suffer for it.
Well, that's where we are now. And there's no reason for war.
No.
We live in a very different world today. These tensions that existed back in the 50s and 60s aren't there.
No.
There's no reason for war between us and Russia or China or Iran. Whatever we don't like about Venezuela, I mean, I can tell you one thing, their oil and gas industry is in ruins.
Yep.
And we have thousands of trained technicians, engineers that know exactly how to make the oil fields work. We could meet with him and say, look, we're unhappy with what you're doing here. If you're willing not to do this, then we'll send all these technicians down there. We'll rebuild the whole thing for you and put it on a business basis that turns a profit for you. I mean, there are alternatives, once again, to bludgeoning everyone with military power.
Again, going back to Venezuela, let's go back to 2019 when Trump tried to overthrow the government, putting that little clown boy Guaido in.
Yep.
Oh, now they're putting out this crap about it's all about a drug war now. They're just making up another line. As I say, you think we would have invaded Iraq if their major export was broccoli? You're talking about the Venezuelan oil.
Well, I know my children wouldn't go there. They didn't like broccoli. But no, you make a good point, and I think it's pretty obvious. But what do we think we're going to get? I mean, what is Trump thinking? They have all the oil we want, we need, we can have this. Wait a minute. Who made him God? Maybe that worked 150, 200 years ago. I'm not even sure it worked well then, but what are we doing that now? Haven't we learned that you don't have to park a tank on top of the oil well to get the oil out?
All right, wrapping up, Douglas, two things I want to ask. Where do you see the Israel war going? And then secondly, where do you see the Ukraine war going?
Well, first of all, as long as we provide essentially unconditional support to Israel, the war that Israel is waging, not just against Iran, but against literally the whole region, is going to continue. Because the Israeli position is that Israel will never be secure, will never be safe, until all of the states in the region are in turmoil, until the whole region is balkanized. And if possible, they will do everything they can to pit one group of Muslim Arabs against another, or one group of Muslim Turks against Muslim Iranians, or anything else they can do. That's their path to security. And we are underwriting it. And what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank is something that has been on a lot of their minds for a long time. I didn't pay any attention to it in my many trips over there because the Israelis I met did not convey the impression to me that they were prepared to do that. There were some that talked about, well, we've got to move these people out. But I didn't hear anybody say we're going to absolutely annihilate everyone in sight if necessary. So I think it's going to end badly for them long term. But in the short term, I don't see any evidence that the support that we provide to them is going to stop or weaken. So that goes on. Now, if they attack Iran this time around, as they did before, Iran may respond very, very ferociously. In other words, the Iranians really did not pull out all the stops the last time, but this time I think they will. My fear is that that's where the Israelis will turn to the use of a nuclear weapon, which would be a catastrophe for them as well as for the whole world. And I don't know what we could do to stop it if they decided to do it. I don't think we have any control over them. I think Mr. Netanyahu has absolute control over the Congress and the White House. So I don't see anything good happening in the Middle East. I think things will continue. As it comes to Ukraine, I think that privately President Trump would like to walk away from it. He realizes that he's not going to have a media moment where he stands in the middle between Putin and Zelensky and they all sign a new treaty and everything breaks out in peace. I think he knows that's not going to happen. He's very invested in what he thinks is going to promote him personally and enhance his prestige. So there's nothing to be gained from Ukraine right now. But unfortunately, I think he's being very childish in the sense that he's going to dig at Moscow, dig at Beijing, dig at anybody out there who doesn't worship at the altar of Donald Trump. And that's why at the beginning of this, I was very concerned because what he's doing is dangerous. It could trigger a confrontation that neither we nor the Russians want. We really need to stop it.
You know, I believe, by the way, that if Trump was president back in 2022, February, when the Ukraine war began, the war would have been over and we would not have given all the money, the hundreds of billions that the Biden administration gave to keep the war going. I don't think Trump would have done that. I don't think this thing would have been gone. But on the other side, like you're talking about, remember when he was running for office, you elect me, I'm going to end this war in 24 hours.
He didn't know what he was talking about.
I'm just saying, you know. I think he wants it to end. But again, like you said, now he keeps saying he's going to punish Russia more and more. So
he says he wants to send 2,000 cruise missiles to Europe. Europeans are going to pay us for them. And then magically they're going to show up in Ukraine. I mean, we've got years ahead of us of production before he's going to see that kind of quantity of equipment go anywhere. I think it'll long be over. You know, the other thing is, look, Europe is changing. Germany is sitting on a volcano.
Yep.
It's about to explode. It's already begun exploding in Great Britain. It will explode in France. And I think President Putin does understand that. And I think that's one of the reasons that he has counseled everyone to be patient, because new nationalist governments will come to power. And this is not nationalism of the Hitler variety. This is nationalism that says, what are we Germans doing provoking Russia? What are we Frenchmen interested in going there for? Why are we British trying to bring down the government of Russia? So I think if I'm right, I think by Christmas it'll be a new set of governments. Certainly in Great Britain and probably in Berlin and Paris.
Yeah, well, again, NATO states to give Ukraine long-range missiles. Kiev is about to get long-range weapons from its Western backers known as, quote, the Coalition of the Willing.
NATO is a column of used cars that should have gone to the junkyard, and they're chugging along and they're belching smoke, but they're not really moving anywhere. They're an anachronism, they're antiquated, and they're useless. The Russians know that.
Yep.
You have all these boutique armies that are not designed to fight anybody who can fight back.
No.
A good friend of mine who passed away recently, unfortunately, a major general in the French army, said, Douglas, the only thing the French army is ready for is safari in North Africa. And that's about right.
Yeah.
You know, Russia has, thanks to our stupidity, thanks to all the foolish nonsense that both the Biden administration and now Trump's administration has done, is now fielded the most powerful ground force in the world.
Yep.
Anybody who goes up against them has got to be prepared for a long and destructive war. So it's not going to happen.
No, it'll be nuclear war. And you mentioned before about if Israel loses, they go nuclear, the Samson option.
That's my biggest worry in the Middle East. I don't think that will happen in Europe because the Europeans, there are no Russians headed to conquer Europe. That's all nonsense. It's just taking time for the populations in Europe to figure out the truth. I enjoy Georgia Maloney. I love to watch her roll her eyes because, she's sitting there saying, these people are idiots. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. And she's right. She's probably the only person at the top of the paradigm right now in Europe that makes any damn sense other than Orban, maybe FICO. But even the Poles still have difficulty letting go of the stupidity.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for all that you do. I very much appreciate you being on with me. And everybody, we're having a peace rally, Occupy Peace, up here in Kingston, New York, on the Four Corners of Freedom, John and Crown Street. You go to occupypeace.com, occupypeace.com. So far, we're having Judge Napolitano, Scott Ritter, Joe Laurie, and others, and hopefully Colonel McGregor will be able to make it up here as well. And I launched this movement over a decade ago, and I have rallies every year. I'm doing as much as I can to bring peace on earth, goodwill to all. And we got to stop these maniacs from stealing our money. As Colonel McGregor said, over $1 trillion in the defense budget, and they won't tell us the several hundred billions they're spending for, quote, intelligence, which is an oxymoron. There's nothing intelligent about it. And so we need to bring back the spirit of this country. And what Occupy Peace is to close the bases overseas, bring home the troops, secure the homeland, and put them to work to rebuild our third world infrastructure. What are they saying, Douglas, about 20 of the veterans are committing suicide a day?
I don't know that it's that high, but we're losing people every day.
So we give them skills. We give them skills we rebuild our third world. You've been around the world. Take the trains in America. Amtrak. How about Amcrap? What a joke.
Well,
Take the subway in New York. It's a night in Calcutta.
Here's something no American understands. While we've spent between $8 and $14 trillion, depending upon how you calculate it, since 2001, on all these failed operations overseas, and that includes now Ukraine and includes the nonsense in the Middle East. Stop and consider that for $1 trillion investment, China has built the greatest infrastructure, transportation, and commercial in the world, not only in China, but across Eurasia. And we're treating this as a big threat to us.
So we need to bring peace back to this country in the true American spirit. Once upon a time, people in Europe, everybody wanted to come to America. Now they don't want to come here anymore, and people are leaving. We need a renaissance. We have to bring back the true meaning of the American spirit, and Colonel McGregor and others are doing that. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks very much. When you get that note about 4 October, if you'd put that on your website, let people know about it, I'd appreciate it.
We're going to promote it like as much as we can.
Okay, my friend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.